Dr. Warren Farrell is the world's leading voice of female issues and feminist issues, and he's the only male who has been selected 3 times as member of the board of the National Organization of Women in New York City. And the reason we are having this call because Dr. Warren Farrell's new book, in our country, Hungary, his book came out just recently. The English title of the book is Why Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say, and the Hungarian title, Miért nem értik a nők, amit a férfiak nem mondanak ki.
What does that mean in Hungarian? How does that translate?
It means we see many beautiful women around us.
Does it really?
I'm just joking, of course.
Oh, you are a devil.
The translation is exactly what the English says, so women can hear what men don't say. And the English book has another sentence, destroying myth, creating love, which the Hungarian has a slightly different translation, kivédi meg a férfiakat. Actually, if I may say, because this conversation goes for Hungarian viewers, I say in Hungarian the subtitle of your book, magyarul úgy hangzik, hogy a mitoszok feloszlatása és a szeretet megalapozása. So I just said in Hungarian, what is the subtitle of your book in English? Okay, Warren, so thank you very much for accepting this call and this interview that goes for the Hungarian Women's Magazine. And I would like to start with a very basic question that one of your book is why men are the way they are. Yeah, why men are the way they are. The other book, very famous book of yours, is The Myth of the Male Power, and you have also touched the subject of the father and child reunion and why men earn more. So you are seemingly dealing with a lot of issues and topics around male and female issues. And for me, the most important thing that you are the first male figure I see, male expert I see, who is giving voice to many aspects of being a male that probably has never been spoken out yet, right? So there are so many things in us males going on which we are not allowed to say, or probably we are not even aware of going on in us, because we are conditioned to look ourselves and other males in schemes, in biases, in preconceptions. And for me, you are that outstanding figure who are breaking down these preconceptions and articulate so beautifully what men really feel and think in the relationship of male and female. So my question to you would be, how men are really, and how we see men, what are the preconceptions, and how men really are. And I'm sure that you could go on and speak many factors in this subject. I would like you to choose 3 of the most important questions or messages, how men really are and how we see them instead of how they really are for the women.
I think one of the things we see about men is that men have are sort of like they're in a relationship, they're mostly interested in sex, and so if the relationship breaks up, they just go on to another sexual partner. And very few people are aware of the studies that show that men as a rule are more broken-hearted, they're more likely to be sick after a relationship. After a divorce, men are 10 times as likely as women are to commit suicide. After they are widowed, a partner dies, a man is 10 times as likely as a woman is to commit suicide. Men, and the reason for this is that the way men get to be able to love women is by earning money and by performing. And so we go out and but the more time we spend getting women's love by being away from the family, we lose the ability to sort of be connected with the family. And so what we're out there working, and people say, oh, he's very interested in his work. Almost nobody understands about a man that he's doing his work so that he can get his family's love. That's the deal. That's his part of the deal. Just like a woman is raising children, traditionally speaking, not because she wants power over the children, but because she wants to make her children's life better than hers. A man similarly is raising the money, oftentimes if he's traditional, for the family because he wants to make his children's life better than his life is, and his wife's life better than it would be if he wasn't making significant amounts of money. But he understands that when he goes out to earn that money, that frequently he has to do things that are taking him away from the family. The more he earns, it is likely the more hours he will work. The more hours he works, the more it takes him away from the family he loves. So he learns to love the family by being away from the love of the family.
So you mentioned in your in your answer traditional. So there are the traditional male role and male functioning, and there is the modern, right, and the postmodern. Correct me if I'm wrong.
For me, the words postmodern means nothing. It's to me it's okay. one of those things where like because I'm 69 years old. When I was born, people were talking about postmodern as if that was relevant to that day, but not the day before. And they've been talking about postmodern ever since. And and so so that's why it doesn't mean anything to me. But it probably has meaning to you. And so, but at any rate, so maybe make a different distinction on that issue.
Yes, maybe, yeah, and I would welcome you to make the distinction if you can say what comes after traditional, like modern, and all the phenomena we see today fall to the modern category.
I see. I got you. I got where you're going with that. The traditional roles, male-female roles, what I see is that they really served us very well for survival purposes. So women learning to raise children, men learning to raise money. But in cultures where there's a fair amount of industrialization, in those cultures there's a fair amount of ability to master the earning of money. You're no longer worried as much about survival. That's at least true in industrialized cultures among the middle class and the upper middle class. So among that group of people, and so there's a famous psychologist named Abraham Maslow that talked about the hierarchy of values. And as we get past survival, we start having other values. We start saying, well, gee, what's the quality of my life? What's the quality of my love? What's the quality of my relationship? Do I have is sex just for reproduction, or is it for also enjoyment? And so we start asking a whole series of questions that we might have thought very secondarily about when we were focused on survival. And so then that implies a potential for greater flexibility of roles. So in traditional roles, men did this and women did that. And in the way I look at the world is that we have an opportunity in the middle and upper middle class in industrialized countries to have more flexible roles. And those more flexible roles are the roles of what I call a gender transition movement, making a transition from the old rigid roles of the past to more flexible roles for the future.
Yes, you like to use gender transition movement instead of men's movement, if I'm correct, right?
Yes, I would prefer there to have not have, even though I was a leader of the women's movement, in retrospect, I think it would have been better if instead of having a women's movement that in practice as it evolved, it did many, many good things by expanding options for women, getting women involved in sports, getting women involved in exercising their talents in millions of ways, and the women's movement's positive contribution is not to be understated. But it also tended to undervalue the family, and it tended to demonize men. It made men's role it talked about patriarchy as if it were a dirty word, And so the word patriarchy often was defined by feminists in academia as a system created by men to benefit men at the expense of women, and certainly making laws that send yourself, your gender, to war, to die, does not benefit, death does not benefit that man, and is not that healthy for him. Having him play the role of working to build the bridges and do welding and build the major buildings where oftentimes men were killed or injured in the process, or working in coal mines and dying from black lung disease, or working in firefighters and dying from black lung disease. These are not roles that men created by men to benefit men at the expense of women. They were roles where men made their sacrifice, and that's not to say that the mother did not also make her sacrifice. Mothers and fathers were both historically doing the same thing. They didn't have rights, they had obligations and responsibilities, and their goal was the same. The goal was to make their children's lives better than their lives were. And so when we understand both sexes from that best intent and recognize that both women and men, when their survival was threatened, often did things that were unbecoming to them. The woman might marry a man she really didn't love because he earned enough to be able to provide income and security for herself and her children, and hopefully have that go to her brothers and sisters and another family. A man might have sex outside of marriage because for 3 or 4 years he's had very little sex, and he wants to have some fulfillment or some excitement. And so both sexes do things that hurt their relationships and are compromises to who they want to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whereas the modern men and women?
The modern man and woman will do all those same things, yeah. But we have a bit more flexibility, meaning that there's the modern woman earns oftentimes significant amounts of money, in some cases more than the average man does. And so she's able to say, I want something more than just a wallet for a husband. I want a man who's sensitive, who's able to listen, who's able to feel, express his feelings, but not too much. But especially listen to my feelings and listen to them without becoming defensive. And who also, when he comes home, if there's a meal to make, that he helps me with the meal. If there's the child to take care of, that he helps me with the children. And so he's a real partner, and he's not just a killer protector. He's also a nurturer, connector.
Yes. In one of your workshops, you said that evolution has not created yet the practices that would support those needs or fulfill those needs that men and women have today. Something like that. I might quote you incorrectly or incompletely, but this was one of the main messages I got from that workshop of yours, and I just find it so deep and true. So could you please talk about that a little bit, about this? What evolution is challenge? How evolution is challenging now men and women, and what we have to develop to catch up with evolution?
Absolutely, but the good news is that the women's movement in the 1960s and 70s started saying, women need, if there's going to be divorces, women need to not be a prisoner of a marriage forever. She needs to be able to learn to earn her own income. And so, and if a woman is married, a woman shouldn't be just told, you need to raise children. She should have 3 choices, basically. One choice was to raise children, another is to raise money, another is to do some combination of both. So we had these, women in the 1970s, when there was a child born, there was a debate among which of those 3 things that she would do for herself. She had, in a sense, three options. She became a multi-option woman, if you will. The man sort of chose among 3 options too. Option 1 was to work full-time. Option 2 was to work full-time, and option 3 was to work full-time. And so, and if he did work, but if he worked full-time and he didn't earn very much, today he doesn't get much respect. But there isn't the option. He doesn't go through 3 different options and say, gee, we have a pregnancy. And as a result of this pregnancy, I'm going to ask myself, should I work full-time? Should I be with the children full-time? Or should I do some combination of both? And whatever my preference is, that's going to count. We haven't even encouraged men and women together to ask those questions together. We ask women to generate their choices, and we expect the men to be a dance partner who follows. Wherever the woman goes, he should dance along with that and not complain but support her. And so I love the fact that women have those three choices. But I think once you're in a relationship as opposed to just an individual, all choices are part of the dance. And so there should be, when a couple is anticipating a child, and then she becomes pregnant, or what we say in the United States, they become pregnant, that there should be a discussion between them, or even before they get married, about, if there's a child, what type of, how much child care do each of us want to do. Because as we look into the future, we will be, and there's no longer job security for life. Both men and women will have to row from both sides of the family boat. That is, in the old days, women rowed from the right side, which was raise children rather. Men rowed from the left side, which was raise money. And the feminist movement has taught women to row from the raise children side and the raise money side, which is wonderful. But no one has taught men to be loved and respected by raising only children. A man who's a house husband does not have much respect in the culture at this time if he's a man doing that, even though a woman doing that can have a fair amount of respect doing that. And so we need to recognize that in the future, both genders need flexibility, and flexibility only comes if you respect and appreciate what both sexes are doing.
Yes. On your workshop, this workshop what I'm talking about was for couples. You do many workshops for couples. I think thousands or 10,000s of people are the numbers that went through your process. And even John Lennon was in one of your workshops in the 80s, if I remember correctly. And you said that in these workshops you are teaching actually couples how to communicate with each other and how to really be able to listen to each other and understand the other person. And in this context you were talking about the evolutionary, that these are evolutionary tools. And to me it translated that, and how I see, and I would like you to comment on that, that today we have the luxury of demanding our partner to be psychologically super duper ready for us, right? So
emotionally intelligent,
emotionally, yeah, the women want the man to be with their full attention most of the time or all the time there, which was not a demand in the old times or in the traditional times, probably. And so I'm looking for a key from you, that what should we do in practice as couples to catch up with these luxury needs that we demand each other.
I think one of the things that if we want, oftentimes people say, well, divorce is too easy. And then other people say, well, make it harder, others say make it easier, so people have real choice. And I think both of those arguments sort of miss the point that almost everybody gets married and they want love. But then as they start to find that there are a little bit of things annoying them about their partner, they either decide to brush it under the table and not bring it up and not just disturb the peace, or they decide to sort of speak up directly about it. And very frequently, even if they're making a suggestion to improve intimacy, the person hearing it oftentimes feels criticized. Almost any time a person feels like there's a suggestion made by their partner to change their attitude, to change their behavior, the person hearing that suggestion, which is intended often for intimacy, oftentimes interprets it as criticism. The result of that criticism is the person hearing it becomes frequently defensive, and they start maybe sidestepping the criticism and counterattacking and saying, well, you do something just as badly as I do it. And then the person goes back, the next time that they have a feeling of what is bothering them about their partner, they fear saying it because they fear that their partner is going to be responding, it's only going to escalate and get worse. Yeah. So they just keep it to themselves. But after a while they start drinking, or they start coming home later, or they start being vulnerable to having a relationship with somebody else who does listen to them, or they think will listen to them. They don't have so much baggage to bring into the relationship. And so that gets destroyed. And so what happened, and then what most relationships evolve into, is that both the woman and man, or the man and man, or the woman and woman begins to walk on eggshells. And so, and that feels good to no one. Everybody feels that they're being stifled. And so the work I do in my couples communication workshops is something that I call cinematic immersion. I train people in 7 mindsets. I say you cannot possibly, that biologically speaking, no one hears personal criticism effectively, because biologically, when we were criticized and we were in a tribe or in a kinship network, that criticism felt like it might be an enemy that was getting ready to attack us. So it was functional for survival historically to get our defenses up and to even kill the criticizer before the criticizer killed us. So when our partner criticizes us, we respond as if we're being killed, or at the very least, like we have to get our defenses up. And so, and that is good for survival, but it's terrible for encouraging our partners to feel safe in saying what she or he needs to feel that they need to say. And so what I have done in my couples communication workshops is to train people to be able to associate being criticized with being loved. Now that's the bottom line, but that's very easy to say and virtually impossible to do. So I have found that I cannot do that unless I basically get people to, in a sense, self-hypnotize themselves by developing 7 mindsets that they do somewhat like someone would do yoga, where you're having a stretch in one way and think about breathing at the same time. You're doing this with your listening process of internalizing, setting aside a time to share with your partner things that you're in conflict about. And then before you listen to your partner's, what you would perceive as the criticism, you meditate mindsets such as the following, saying to yourself, when my partner feels a safe environment on my part to say whatever she or he feels that they need to say, they will feel loved by me. The more they feel loved by me, the more love they will feel for me. Now, as you internalize that and you emotionally feel that what we used to think of as criticism, I'm now going to be seeing as an opportunity to be loved more by my partner. You begin to take baby steps toward eventually feeling like you want your partner to be able to share the things that are bothering them, because you know that if you handle it well, that they will feel more loved by you and therefore more love for you. So the old fear, which is when I hear my partner criticizing me, which means that they will abandon me, or they'll want to kill me, or they couldn't want to live with me or love me if they think that about me, you're realizing that the exact opposite can be true if you create a safe environment for your partner's feelings. And that's as all the tip of every iceberg is, has more things that it creates as questions. There's many other things you have to do to, in combination, feel in a very comfortable space to really wanting to invite your partner to elaborate on his or her criticism. And all those things together allow a person to do what I consider the most important single thing that humans need to do to evolve, which is to learn how to hear people with different perspectives. When I say hear people with different perspectives, I'm not I'm talking about men and women. I'm talking about parents and children. I'm talking about siblings. I'm talking about people who are Republicans and Democrats in the United States, or Israelis and Palestinians. I'm talking about a type of listening that biologically and historically, cross-culturally, we have not been trained to do, which is when we do it, it will become the most important next step of our evolution.
That's beautiful, Warren. It's beautiful. Is this what you were teaching to John Lennon as well in the 80s?
No, in the 80s when I was, this was before I was into the communication aspect of this.
Okay.
When John came into the men's group that I formed, he had some hurt and pain around the issue of the fact that when he had a first child in England, he hadn't really been involved with that child, and he knew that that was not what he wanted to do in the future. And he had made a significant amount of money, and obviously with the Beatles, and
he had a good job.
He had a good job. But you know, the more people have good jobs and the more money they make, the more there are thousands of people who are making money from the money that they make, and so they put pressure on you to continue making more money because their money is dependent upon your money. And so when he joined the men's group, he was in an upheaval about here he was, you know, one of the most famous people in the world, and he didn't have, and yet he Yoko Ono and he were contemplating having a new child. And should he take off time and be with that child, or should he, you know, what should he do? And he decided to take off 5 years from being the most successful, you know, singing group in the world to raise his son Sean. And that took him, of course, completely out of the music scene, or at least 99.9% out of the music scene for a number of years. But he shared with me that that was probably the best decision he'd ever made in his life.
Wow. What a dedication of a father.
It's just an amazing dedication, and you know, and there were not a lot of many people were not happy about his decision, or so he told me, for the reason I mentioned to you a moment ago.
Okay, so my last question would be about, can you say some eye-opener for women about men? So women, when you go home, what you don't know about your man is this and this, so you better listen now, because I tell you, you open your eyes and you will see how men really are at home.
Yes. Let me share what I did that many women do when I started forming many of my hundreds of men's groups that I formed. I formed the groups, and then I asked men to speak. And then as they spoke, I interrupted and I explained to them what I thought a better solution was. And many men say to me that I feel like when I married this woman I love, that she was the most beautiful person I'd ever met, and she was just so lovely, and she listened to me, and she cheered me on, and she was so supportive. But as I got to marry, shortly before and after we got married, that she started becoming very critical. She had mostly to-do lists. She felt she was often complaining about things. And when she complained about things, I tried to do what I could to fix those things, but she was always finding the portion of what I did inadequate. And so I started to even fear trying to fix the problem. And so I felt, after a while, I started to feel very controlled by her. So most women acknowledge that they do more complaining than they would like and more criticizing than they would like. But most women don't acknowledge or understand that from the man's perspective, that criticism that the woman is often good enough to acknowledge, and that complaining oftentimes makes the man feel controlled, like a child, like he's not trusted, like the opposite of a hero. It would be as if the man was telling you a little bit every day, gee, that dress doesn't look very good on you because it makes your breasts look small. Or I noticed that you're gaining just a little bit of weight. And he thinks he's putting it tactfully, but if he said that day after day, it would start grinding on you, and you would feel like a less attractive woman. And that's the way many men tell me that they feel oftentimes. And so they feel deeply hurt inside, and then they agree to having a child, even many times when they really would prefer to have a deeper relationship with a woman, in part because they feel that that's what they're supposed to do, in part because they think the woman's going to be happy with the child. And oftentimes when the child is born, the man feels he has to increase his devotion to the workplace, which takes him away from the children and the woman he loves, only to come back and see that the woman is more in love and devoted to the children, or so it appears to him, than to him. And his heart is broken, and he begins to start straying. And the love that both sexes wanted oftentimes disappears. And so if I were to share something that I would love women to hear, that would be, in a sense, one of the messages of women can't hear what men don't say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the interview.